And every day, I practice martial arts.
So Wong Jack Man, as everyone knows, you know,
Right.
I believe it's around 1964, happened in Oakland. And, you know, basically the fight had nothing to do with Bruce fighting for the honor of teaching non-Chinese. That's a bunch of hot nonsense. It had everything to do with the fact that Bruce Lee essentially insulted a majority of the Chinese martial arts community of the Bay Area at a demonstration that he gave at the opening of a film.
Blatantly, yes.
And so, you know, the local Chinese martial arts community had felt like Bruce Lee was saying a lot of, you know, brash things, or, you know, was trying to offend them or whatever. And then so finally they had found someone to go and fight for their honor. And this guy that they found was Wong Jack Man. And Wong Jack Man famously showed up to Bruce Lee's school in Oakland, and they had a relatively short fight. You know, Wong Jack Man came and he, you know, first proposed a number of rules for the fight, and then Bruce was like, no, we fight with no rules or we don't fight. And then Wong Jack Man, you know, purportedly reluctantly agreed to that. And then they had the fight. And famously, you know, if you look at the fight on paper, I mean, Bruce Lee, you know, one, he had street fighting
I
experience.
love how
in
you
Hong
say
Kong.
it's on paper.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you look at it
Yeah.
on paper, because there's some people now, they're like, oh, the controversial fight. There is no controversy, okay? the only thing is that maybe it didn't look as smooth or as cool or what you expect Bruce, because it's a real fight. We're not talking about the final scene from Enter the Dragon. We're talking about an actual fight
Yeah.
between two people who are trying to hurt each other, right? So, of course, if you could see a video, if there was a hidden camera all the way back in 1964,
Oh, man.
and you can watch this exchange between Bruce Lee and Wong Jack
If
Man,
only.
you probably would be like, that doesn't look like the Bruce Lee. That doesn't look like what I think of Bruce Lee, right? And that's not to take anything away from him. It was a real fight. No real fights look great, okay?
Yeah.
Unless you have a massive difference between the skill levels of the two fighters. So when you see someone who just looks phenomenal, normally you have someone who's got real fighting skill, maybe fighting someone who's 3 pegs below him, right? So he's able to kind of show more stuff. But if you have people, you know, who are a little bit closer in level, it's going to look like a fight, okay?
Yeah.
And so what we know from what Bruce Lee wrote about in letters in the years after is he always referred to Wong Jack Man as the runner, okay? And so the story was, I mean, there are many,
Salty.
there are many
Yes.
takes on it, right? But basically, you know, Bruce stands there in his zhongzhao, and, you know, Wong Jack Man gets in
Right.
whatever his position is.
I see where you're going with this.
And,
Yeah.
you know, as Bruce, you know, in a very kind of basic Wing Chun way, you know, tries to storm forward using chain punches, using a very aggressive frontal assault, so to speak. Wong Jack Man, he doesn't back away like the way a boxer might. He literally turns around and starts running. Okay? He's not shuffling backwards, okay? By all accounts, he literally starts running. And Bruce cannot advance and just do an advancing shuffle step and chain punch him. Bruce literally has to start running while chain punching. All right, so you have to imagine if you could go and watch this video of the fight and you're thinking of Bruce Lee, you know, giving this like real fast kick or whatever, and you're like, oh man, that guy's totally badass. And then you see a fight of him, and it's literally a grown man chasing another grown man around a very small kung fu school, while one guy's running away and the other guy's hitting him on the back of the head, and, you know, come back here, right? And then Wong Jack Man, and this has been talked about in a few different accounts, while he's running away from Bruce Lee, he kind of turns and looks over his shoulder.
Oh, yes.
And he scratches Bruce on the neck. All right?
Yes.
Which, I don't know, when I hear that, I go like, oh, man, you punk.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
the famous-
He's running away and he scratches him like a
the
kitty
famous-
cat,
yes,
right? And of
yes.
course, you know that his students are not going to say like, oh, this is, you know, they're not going to say, oh, this is a scratch done out of desperation.
No,
They're
that was
going
a
to say,
technique.
like, yeah, this is the reverse iron claw technique from the 14th Lohan form or whatever, right? Instead of what it really was is a desperate attack by
Yeah.
a man who's trying to save his life, right?
Oh, man.
And then so he scratches Bruce on the neck, which I can imagine kind of bothered Bruce while he's running away. And then basically, Wong Jack Man trips on a little ledge that's in the back of the school. He trips and falls down.
Yeah.
And Bruce, who's chasing him like a maniac, also trips and lands on top of him. And then starts punching him on top and says in Cantonese, "Lei fuk fuk a," which is, do you give up or not? Right? And what's interesting about that is the reason why I know he said "Lei fuk fuk a" is
sort
because
of like uncle, yeah.
yeah, it's like
uncle.
saying uncle, right? Is because Linda Lee, his wife, his widow, she was there, and she told the story. And mind you, she's Caucasian, she's not Chinese. And when she tells the story, she says, "Yeah." And then he got on top, and then he said, "Lei fo ah."
And she knows it, yeah.
Yeah, she knows it because she was there. But also, how would she know that specific Cantonese phrase if it didn't happen?
Yeah.
You know, that she's on top and says, that Bruce Lee says, "Lei fo ah," and then
She probably was like, "What did you say to him?"
Exactly, right? And then Wong Jack Man gives up, and that's the end of the fight. And then later, Wong Jack Man goes to the newspapers, and then, very similar to, some famous fights in Wing Chun between various grandmasters and stuff. The fight happens, someone loses, and then immediately after the fight, there's an excuse. I slipped, or the guy sucker punched me, or whatever, right? It's always the same thing, right? And of course,
the talon of death.
Yeah, I used the talon of death on him, and
Word is, I'm a kung fu genius. Practice all day like a genius. Dedicated my life like a genius. Fought like, taught like.